up, guys? It's time for another episode, and today we're going to try something completely crazy. I have been working on this target top behind me for over 3 months now, and really I've been working on the other side, trying to get it symmetrical for almost 2 months now. It didn't actually take me all that long to get the first one done. It's the second one that has to be symmetrical that's really kicking my butt. And so while I've continued to work on it with fiberglass and sheetrock and body filler, trying to manually get it done, in the background I started working on an alternative process, which is something I talked about a long time ago, which was 3D printing. To 3D print it, it's got to get designed in 3D. So I've been using Fusion 360, and I was able to get the bottom half, the half that sits against the fender, done fairly easily. It's the part that comes up, the actual sail panel that comes out, that's giving me a lot of trouble. I've got it done in a 3D sketch, and I'm very happy with it, and I cannot get Fusion to patch it or loft it correctly. I spent like 5 days. Obviously there's something simple that I don't understand about lofts and patches. But since I don't know anybody else who knows Fusion 360 to be able to teach me, I've not been able to get it done. So I'm going to try something else completely crazy today. I recently got an Oculus Rift, Quest, an Oculus Quest 2. It's sitting over there. There's actually a 3D design program in Oculus where you actually take the controllers and you draw things in 3 dimensions. So what I'm going to try doing today is taking the Oculus, starting that program, and actually trying to trace out the panel in 3 dimensions, and then seeing how that works, how well that comes out, dimensionally accurate, how well it'll patch the panels. So the Oculus does screencasting, so I'll screencast and record that, and we'll set up the time lapse on the GoPro. And if we're successful, we'll make a nice little video showing how it all came to be. If it's a failure, we'll make a much shorter video telling you why it was a failure.
The time lapse of me using the Oculus didn't work out very well. I had it set to 10-second intervals, which is what I normally use when I'm working in the garage. And at 10-second intervals, you couldn't really tell what was going on because I was moving so fast relative to the time lapse. So I did screencast it, and I've got the video here of the screencast, and so I'll try to talk through it and explain what was going on. So you have to understand when we're watching this exactly what I got going on, that I have a headset on that puts me in a virtual reality so that I can't really see anything around me, and I'm trying to feel the target top that's in front of me so that I can trace it with the remote, so that I will have a dimensionally accurate 3-dimensional rendering of it in the program. And the remote is, it's big. It's, you put your fist around it and it's still sticking out the top, so it's not like a stylus on a tablet or something like that. It's a large object. So I kind of had to try and decide what I was going to use as a touch point to trace with. And it doesn't really matter what you choose. You can use the bottom or the top or a corner or whatever. As long as you're consistent, then you'll have a dimensionally accurate part when you're done tracing. You can see here I did not have a dimensionally accurate part when I was done tracing because I was 1.5 inches, 2 inches low when I came back to where I started. So I tried to go back the other way, thinking that I must have done something wrong. Let me just go back the other way, and then I'll delete the rail. But you can see I'm really having a lot of trouble there. What I did was I tried to use my pinky that I stuck out from the end of the remote, like you're holding a teacup or something, and tried to keep that on the corner as I traced it around. But the problem is the remote's pretty big, and so I was getting a lot of rotation around my pinky, and that was causing me to drift up and down and side to side. So I took another swing at it, this time using the knuckle on my middle finger, and as you can see, I don't last very long at that either. I basically wind up deleting it pretty early on, and realized that I was never going to be able to blindly trace this. So then what I did is I took the headset off, which is why you can't see a whole lot that's going on in the video here. I took the headset off and held it in my left hand so that I could look into it and see what I was doing, and then move it out of the way and look at what I was actually working on. So right there, I held it up, I looked at my hand, started the drawing, and then I pulled it away, and I'm actually looking at the remote in the real world, tracing around the device right now, and so you can't see anything in the headset. So I will skip past some of this till we get to here, getting pretty close to the end here, and you can see that my lines tend to come back together and meet up properly, because I was very consistent with the placement of the remote versus the device I was tracing. So that is what I wound up with out of in the garage, with the target in front of me and the headset and the remote, trying to trace it out. So once I had that, it's basically a frame. I had to get surfaces on it, which is what I was actually struggling with in Fusion, was getting surfaces on. So it took me pretty much all day that day. I did that on a Friday morning, and it took me till pretty late that night to wind up with a surface model that I was happy with, which I've got a little clip of right here. I used the rails that were there. I built surfaces on them, and then I deleted the rails and closed all the surfaces up, and got them all stitched together with no gaps into something that I was, pretty happy with as something I could 3D print. So I took this model here. It exports as an OBJ, which is a mesh, and I tried to take it into Mesh Maker or Mesh Mixer, and from there I wanted to use the Make Solid option so that I could put it into an STL and slice it up. But I couldn't get anything to make it solid. I tried Mesh Mixer, I tried a couple of other programs, and they all kept omitting entire surfaces. And I think the problem was that my surfaces that I made in Gravity Sketch weren't three-dimensional. They were infinitesimally thin, I guess, the way surfaces work in Gravity Sketch. So what I wound up doing was actually importing it as a mesh into Fusion 360, which was where all my problems started. Actually, was Fusion 360. But I decided it was the quickest path to actually getting my printer churning out parts. I'm sure there's a lot of things I could do better in Gravity Sketch. I could do better in Mesh Mixer. I could do better in Fusion 360. I was basically at a point where I knew I had 2 weeks worth of printing to do, and I just wanted to get things printing. So I was trying to bulldoze my way through, or brute force my way through what I was doing. So I imported this mesh into Fusion, and then I created a 3D sketch to encapsulate it, go around it, which was kind of where I already was. I already had a 3D sketch that I thought was dimensionally accurate, but I couldn't get it to patch. So I was kind of back where I started, except for I knew this part was very dimensionally accurate, because I had physically traced the part using the Oculus. And so then I had to get things patched, and that required a trip to the Autodesk forum to ask a question, but some people were able to straighten me out. Turns out patching is very peculiar or picky, and so you kind of have to do things in a certain order. But I was able to get everything patched. As you can see here, these are surfaces that were created in Fusion 360 and that line up with the wireframe of what I wanted to print. So from there, what I did was I built the frame out with the roll bar that I wanted this to sit around, so that I could kind of tighten it up against the roll bar and make sure that I didn't have any issues with my scaling or anything like that. And then I brought that surface in, those patch surfaces in, aligned them to that. I did tweak them some from there, and then after I was happy with them, I did a thicken which made them. I thickened them to 3.5 millimeters. That seems like about a good thickness to print to, based on some testing I'd done. And then once they were thick, I could extrude against them, and so I was able to build the flanges, which I don't know if this right here actually has the flanges in it. Yeah, I think I can. No, I don't see any flanges on this one, so I haven't built the flanges yet. That probably happened after I made the video, so but I was able to get it fitted against the frame and then mirror it, so now you can see I've got a whole one, and here you can see the flanges actually. So you can see the flanges I put on the front, and you can see them on the back there. And then I started cutting it. So that is a bunch of different bodies. I didn't mold them all together because it's easier to print if they're separate bodies, but some of the bodies themselves were still too big to print. So you can see the blue lines there where I've done some jigsaw puzzle style cuts to break that body there, the quarter panel edge, into multiple pieces, and then I'll glue them back together. So printer's going. I've printed the first 4, and probably got about an hour left on the 5th part, and then I'll just have one more little tail piece hanging off the end, and I'll be able to glue that rail together and take it out to the car and see how it fits. So as you can see, I'm printing almost non-stop these days. The only time this thing isn't printing is if a print finishes after I go to bed. I start another one up first thing in the morning. I've got the first 3 pieces of the bottom edge printed, so that piece will glue on there, and then this piece will come down, and then that one, that one will go in there and get glued together, and that one will get glued on the front, and then the next piece up there I'll attach on the back here, and then I'll have probably one more piece to finish up the rail that runs down along the quarter panel, and then I'll start printing the wall that comes up. So I don't know if this is going to be any less work than what I was doing, trying to do everything by hand with fiberglass and body filler and drywall, but I've got a lot more confidence that I'll have symmetry if I go about it this way. So we'll see. It's going to take almost 2 weeks to print all the panels. But only 1 week for one side, so hopefully by next week I'll have enough parts printed that I can test fit one side and see how it's looking.